Hi, everybody. Before we get to the introduction, I did want to give a disclaimer that the month of November is going to be something a little bit different on this podcast. I am traveling a bunch throughout the month of November, and as the midterms have started to ramp up and the primary is right around the corner, just at the beginning of next year, I've gotten a ton of candidates to come on and talk with me. So many that my schedule was starting to push people into like January and February. So in order to try to combat that, I decided to release 4 guest episodes the month of November. They are all candidates from Illinois and all people with interesting backgrounds and stories and policies so that you guys have the ability to learn what some of the Democrats running are kind of standing on. So without further ado, welcome to the first week of Illinois Candidate Month. Hi everyone, welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. So for everyone that doesn't know, I live in Illinois. And I live in Jan Schakowsky's district. Jan Schakowsky announced that she is retiring earlier this year, and it has opened up an incredibly large and diverse primary. At first, when the primary started, I was feeling like a lot of the candidates were a little bit lackluster. I ended up on TikTok and about this race and fell into a series of comments about candidates. And one of the candidates that was mentioned over and over again is today's guest. Today, we are having on Bushra Amiwala. Bushra is born in Chicago to Pakistani immigrant parents and raised in Skokie. Bushra has lived in Illinois 9 her entire life, and she's inspired to give back to the place that raised her. Bushra made history as the first Gen Z elected official in the United States. Ever. Her leadership as an elected school board member has ensured that thousands of children have access to a quality public education. Bushra has put herself through college twice and has a decade of nonprofit experience. She is a trailblazing public servant, bridge builder, and a bold voice for underrepresented communities. I am incredibly proud and honored that Bushra agreed to come on Current Affairs Unfiltered and speak to me and speak to all of you. And I really feel like she will be a fantastic voice for this district in Washington, D.C. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Bushra. Bushra, thank you so much for coming on. It is so great to have you.
Thanks, Paige. It's great to see you today.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if we could start with your political career. You were first elected to public office at the young age of 19. How has being younger and being often underestimated because of that shaped your perspective and what it means to be a leader?
I always take me back into the year and month when I first launched my political campaign because it was in March of 2017. Just to remind us where we all were in the world, this was 3 months after Donald Trump first instated the Muslim ban during his first 3 months as president of our country. This was also the same time the Oscars selfie broke the internet, which I say because if that happened today, we would have no idea why we're liking or retweeting this. And this is before AOC got elected. And I lead with all of these little fun facts to take us back as to what it meant to be a first-time candidate, being young, running then, is so net different than what it means now. And being the first in any capacity or space is difficult because there isn't a playbook that exists for you to follow. And a lot of whether it have been the mistakes or considerations I was making, I made in real time for others to now follow and learn from, even if I didn't really have it myself.
Right. And how has that kind of shaped how you're running your campaign now?
I see it come up in a lot of interesting ways. So now I've basically run for public office 3 separate times, in addition to this being my 4th.
And how old are you now?
I'm now 27.
That's a lot of running in, the last 8 years.
No, it's so true. And each cycle couldn't have been more different than the former. What is interesting is that Donald Trump is still in office now, which is wild to me, running at the federal level. However, Trump 2.0 is far more destructive than we could have ever imagined during his first tenure in presidency. And I lead with that because the context by which I've been running, it means that any learnings I've also carried with me, I have to remind myself to be agile. And that change is really the only constant. And elections and getting elected is never a one size fits all. But what has reigned true in all of this is that people don't really vote for policies, ideas, or platform. They vote for people. And especially in a Democratic primary like this, where maybe there isn't transformative differences between myself and others in this race, it will come down to the person.
Right. You also mentioned to me that sometimes you feel like people or groups will try to other you because of your age, your background. How do you respond to something like that? And how has that shaped the way that you campaign?
I'll never forget a piece of advice that a mentor gave me that was if you are asked the wrong question, you cannot give a right answer. Let me say it again. If the question is phrased inherently wrong, there is no right way to answer that. Meaning, if I am someone who is being otherized for my identity in any which way, yet I am, for the example of this, the only candidate that was born and raised in this district and lived here my entire life, the irony of that is so fascinating to me. I have to almost rewrite this narrative that exists, whether it be a question of, oh, well, when did you move here? Where coupled with, well, I'm someone that was born here and attended Stephen K. Hay Elementary School in CPS and moved to Skokie when I was 9. And that is what it comes down to. And then another flip side of it is not responding is a response. I actually, thankfully, while many groups have tried to otherize who I am as a candidate, haven't had to do much legwork to rewrite what that looks like because my track record, consistency, and involvement in the community has been able to speak for itself.
That's like the biggest disservice to me and everything that you said is that people like the fact that you are the only one born and raised in this district. And full disclosure to anyone listening, I was also born and raised in the district that you are running in. That should be a badge of honor rather than something to go, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So you talk a lot about bridging communities. Can you give a concrete example or moment where you successfully built a sort of consensus among very different groups or communities?
We're living in a time today where our current administration thrives off of further dividing all of us in any which way. And I recently saw something that was like, there aren't even two parties. There's just a billionaire class, and then there's the rest of us, right? There's the 1%, and then there's the 99% rest of us. And that being a North Star that I remind myself continuously that all of us just want safe neighborhoods to live in, be able to afford our groceries, and have good schools that we can send our kids to because schools are the nucleus of a healthy community. That being said, when I was running for the Board of Education, I was 20 at that time, and I still do pride myself in being the candidate that wants to listen more than speak. And when I went on this listening tour, I found that there were Muslim families that would share that they want their kids to have options of halal food. Similarly, in the Jewish spaces I was in, they were looking for accommodations for kosher food. Also, when I was in rooms where people were Sikh, they would say that they cannot eat meat that is either halal or kosher. Therefore, we have vegetarian food options similar to those that are Hindu. And this reason that many different faith groups, so my school district has 66 different languages spoken. So needless to say, it's a very diverse school district. And
Oh, wow.
I know. I know. And unless you're on an active listening tour, there would have been no way to have seen the similarity in what people are looking for. I mean, as a kid, school lunch is what I looked forward to throughout the day. Me. And I made it so that my public school became the first in the state of Illinois to mandate the offering of halal, kosher, and vegetarian food options for the people they serve. And that's coalition building at its finest. If I champion for just one of those accommodations in a vacuum, it may not have passed with as much ease as it did when you brought it all together. And that is coalition building, because now when we have each of these respective groups celebrating the win of this dietary accommodation, they know that it came with other accommodations as well.
Well, right. Making sure everybody's
Yeah.
happy and
Well,
has the things that they want and need.
yes, 100%. It's like a win-win-win. And
Right.
sometimes these little facelifts, you're like, this is like the net obvious thing to do. So I'm glad that that's what fits in the record.
Right. So let's move on to some of your kind of policies and platforms. You've pledged not to take corporate PAC money, as so many are doing this time around in these midterms. You've been consistent about it ever since you started running for office. Why is that so important to you? And how do you keep your campaign competitive while holding that line? Like, is that something that's difficult to do?
I appreciate that you called out that it's something I've been doing consistently for almost 8, 9 years. And it's something that is newer, profound by other groups and people and organizations. So for me, I was a teenager. I was 19, running against a 16-year Democratic incumbent for the Cook County Board of Commissioners. And that same year, the Cook County Board had passed what was called a soda tax, which was a penny per ounce tax on any sugary beverage, which include drinks such as Gatorade to carbonated soda and soft drinks. And I was on a personal level against this tax as a candidate because that money, one, was not being reinvested back into communities. And then two, in a way, a bottle of water is still more expensive than the soda. So you're not really preventing people and sparking healthy communities. So it was just a really interesting, I had a nuanced lens on it, to say the least. So I was approached by corporate soda companies. Think, uh, literally, think like Snapple, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, literally a soda pack that was designed on this issue to lobby. And they offered me $54,500 worth of corporate PAC money, which is something that, like I said, people can say they'll decline the corporate PAC money, but let's look at the people that have consistently already been doing it after being offered it. And this was, again, in 2017 when it wasn't trendy or popular to do so. I declined that money because the reason that I was against the soda tax was not because I'm pro soda company. And that's why it's important to me to decline corporate PAC money, because these political action committees essentially buy your loyalty by investing in you during the campaign cycle. So when I have to now vote on something that's voting my conscience as a seated member of Congress or whatever elected role that I have, even today as an example, I now am beholden to another interest group because I'm held by their check. And I just don't want to be bought. And I won't be bought. And I historically haven't been bought. And how I keep it afloat is I remember that year, I made a little YouTube video of myself declining that corporate PAC money. I posted it on Facebook and YouTube. And I was like, maybe it'll go viral and everyday people will donate money to me instead. And it went kind of micro viral on Facebook. It was cute, but people didn't really donate after seeing it. But I did get a lot of messages saying, power to the people, great message, good for you. And I still have political commentators that talk about that election because I was one of the first Gen Zs even running at that time too. And it was against an incumbent and I was declining PAC money. So they were saying how not only was I well beyond my time, but two, it's probably the reason why I lost. And the way you stay competitive is you don't lean on viral moments to fundraise. You lean on everyday, real-rooted relationships to build a consistent and growing donor base. And I'm so grateful to be doing that right now in my campaign because slow and steady is what wins the race. And these are the folks that'll be here donating in Q4 and inviting their friends to donate come Q1 as well.
Absolutely. So like I said, this is no corporate money has been something that I've noticed that a lot of campaigns are starting to turn towards. I don't know what happened, but it seems to be a popular thing going on right now. Do you expect, and are you kind of seeing, that some of your opponents are taking corporate PAC money? And how are you combating that in this election?
So I also, when I talk about corporate PAC money, I also want to call out what I call bully PAC money. And let's talk about that one first. So bully PAC money includes AIPAC, includes Democratic Majority for Israel. It includes 314 Action, all of these groups that use their money to oust candidates and make up lies. That is a bully PAC. I will not take bully PAC money either. And when it comes to corporate PAC, I've already seen insurance and oil and gas buying some of our candidates left and right like it's nothing. And I might not be the person that calls that out, but I also think that truth always comes to light, as does justice, and you can see it and hear it in the ways that people will take on the progressive label, yet not be able to claim something like Medicare for all that they're championing. So shout out to the insurance PAC for that one.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. This is definitely shaping up to be an interesting primary, if I do say so myself. So, your Books Not Bombs initiative calls for shifting 1% of the defense budget to increase education funding. What inspired this idea? Because I think that's a really catchy name for it. And I also think it's a fantastic idea. And
Mm.
how would you sell it to colleagues in Washington?
So, as a school board member, when I first joined the board, one of the first things that intrigued me was the budget for our public schools. And fun fact, you get federal funding, you get state funding, and then you get local funding from property taxes. And I was hyper aware of property taxes because growing up as a part of a first generation immigrant family, part of the working class, the question every year was, can we afford to stay in the home that we own because of property taxes? And I was pretty stunned to see that my public school only gets 2% of its funding from federal funding sources. 2%. And that's pretty normal across all public schools in the state. They get about 10% from the state level funding, and the rest comes from property taxpayers, homeowners, and renters annually and biannually. And because in suburbia, as an example, there's such a strong discrepancy where you have like malls and plazas, right? You don't really have small businesses trickled up throughout neighborhoods. That puts the residential to commercial skew so heavy on residential that you have these stark contrasts. So when Mike was coming up with the Books Not Bombs Act, one, I say 1% from the defense fund, which leads to a 10% increase in federal funding for education, just to seemingly show that transfer of budget. The stark contrast between our defense budget and education is the first piece. The second piece is bringing it back to property taxes and how this is the root cause of affordability. When people talk about, getting priced out of their homes, they're already homeowners. It's the property taxes or their rent and how that's allocated or their mortgage that's pricing them out. So I think it's a shining example of my school board experience coupled with lived experience where the idea came from. One last thing I want to say on this too, not to be on a high horse, but people will oftentimes push back and say, well, what about our security? We can't be pulling money from the defense fund. And I'll say, let me tell you something else. We should reduce our defense fund by 5% in general, because if we're efficiently investing in cybersecurity, which is net cheaper, but also what we should be investing in, our country's the only modern country from the 33 industrial nations in the world that is not invested in cybersecurity. So if some foreign entity came for our Wi-Fi routers or our cell phones, we would not be equipped to withstand that, by the way.
Right. Well, right. And it's the defense budget is one thing that I'm always going to, I don't want to say be anti, but I'm always going to be the one to say, hey, it's a little overinflated in my humble opinion.
Totally.
Yeah. You've also called for making public colleges tuition free and also canceling student debt. That is something that is over the last couple of years been a little bit contentious and something that people don't seem to be as interested in as when the idea was first presented. So how would you go about building support for something like that has at a certain point in time, it had a lot of traction and a lot of people behind it. And at this point, it's seeming to have, I'm going to choose my words carefully, fallen out of favor, I guess, with the general public and politicians.
I take the incremental route with something like that. When we're going from 0 to 100, where right now we're in a country that prioritizes student debt over education, it can seem really pie in the sky to think about what a free public tuition option looks like. So for me, that means community college at the minimum should be tuition free, and that can be pulled from federal funding sources to make it so that students have options beyond privatized university and or even in-state university. So let's just talk about community college first. I'm a big, let's take an incremental win and find compromise and not let net transformative changes be the reason why we don't make progress. And I think about my friends that I graduated high school with. I have friends who went to work at NASA, some that have performed on Broadway, and others that have literally been drafted in the NFL. And I have so many more friends who could have done that and more, but couldn't afford to go to college. And in a time where our FAFSA, our federal financial aid sources, are being cut, that again, disproportionately impacts students that rely on community college as their option to get further education after high school. That is, again, a product of a broken system. And when I talk about having billionaires paying their fair share, because right now we're seeing these FAFSA cuts and healthcare cuts line the pockets of these billionaires, I like to put it into context for people. So if you and I randomly pulled out a $5 bill from our pocket and it's our lucky day, we found $5. But if we were billionaires and we did that, we just pulled out $500,000 from our pocket. And that is why I'm so pro billionaires paying their fair share. They don't need our empathy right now.
I love that example, but I hate everything about it.
Yeah. It's giving I needed the analogy.
Oh my God. Nobody's ever said that, but like, at least I've never seen that before. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and I say it so clearly like that because people will say, well, why are we going after the ultra wealthy? It's like, because they can, like they just can. And it's not normal to be in a society where you have 12 families that make that amount and the rest of us can barely afford to buy groceries.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
speaking about the economy, another trigger word, another buzzword in today's news cycle, what is your plan for protecting workers from AI-driven job loss? That's another thing that is at the forefront of everyone's mind. It feels like, the job market is crashing and burning before our eyes. It's a scary time to be looking for a job. And with AI on the rise, nothing seems clear anymore. So especially in Illinois, like, how do you plan to balance all of those things together?
It's an incredibly scary time to be entering the job market. And I believe you also graduated class of 2020 from undergrad.
Yes.
So same here. I was also a 2020 undergrad and I worked at Google for the past 5 years. I just quit my job to run for Congress full time. And I think about the amount of people I know who either rely on exclusively their place of employment for healthcare for them and their families, coupled with those that were on work visas that when laid off overnight, what does that look like for their family? So, first, let's talk about proactive and reactive solutions. The reactive solution is that government can easily mandate an 8-week notice before any mass related layoffs. That includes tech related layoffs. So, the 4,000 people we saw impacted at Salesforce just 3 weeks alone. That also includes the 20,000 folks in the shipping and logistics space that were laid off earlier this year due to Trump related tariffs. It's not just AI related, it's not related to efficiency. And we're seeing that a lot of these jobs are being shipped offshore as well, while companies, again, exploit workers and make more profit. The second piece is I think about the employment crisis hand in hand with the current state of our climate. And when we're investing in clean, green energy, that job industry and market is so beyond untapped at this point right now. I think about how much time and energy went into installing solar panels in this new cul-de-sac that my school district invested in for our snow plowing materials, as an example. And that is something that we can have a smart city where everything is either wind or solar panel energy in a way. And that in itself is low hanging fruit. These are table stakes. It's not a shortage of jobs. It's actually just an exploitation crisis of these big corporations and companies that are taking advantage of the working class. It actually always just keeps coming back to that.
You got my gears spinning a little bit. So when we're seeing things like, Trump canceling the contracts of wind farms and stuff like that, like, do you attribute that, in your opinion, do you attribute that to like a sort of job loss because it's the loss in investment and something like that?
It's yes, and I attribute it to job losses. I also attribute it to oil and gas doing their corporate
Of
lobby
course.
thing. And I think that's what pulling back the silver lining between all of this, you see how interconnected all of these different things are. And I'm glad that our generation is waking up to this, but it feels almost helpless to some extent too, which is why a
Right.
campaign like mine couldn't have come at a better time and point in our society as well, where people are like, oh, here is a capable person who understands how this works and has done it previously before. That I think is that unique selling point that gives us hope today. Because this said can sound really detrimental, but I don't mean for it to be.
Right. Well, yeah, and like we said, like it's a scary time. Everything feels very uncertain, very unsure. And, I like what you said about like it just things are all interconnected. Like I feel like what you said about like it's oil and gas. Like you're saying that, and I'm like, well, no, duh, of course it is. But like I'd never, I guess, like taken that second step to be like, yeah, of course, that's why we can't have wind farms or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And even on the note of like clean green energy, I was telling someone that the energy and climate space needs a little bit of a PR facelift because not only is clean energy good for the environment, it's net more cost effective and efficient. And I'm like, you're telling me this is the more cheap, energetically efficient option and it's good for our environment. Why aren't we doing it again? Like, it's
Right.
insane that the Green New Deal is just fed. Again, it's one of those win-win-win options that should surprise us and concern us that our country is not adopting.
Right. On to another hot topic issue, immigration. Again, something incredibly polarizing, something that is in the news to this very day and has been for the last 5 years at least. It remains one of the most divisive issues in U.S. politics. What reforms would you personally prioritize if elected?
So I've been advocating about around in the community around immigration for since February, really actively just against ICE, by the way. And I come from an immigrant family, and my parents worked extremely hard to make ends meet. They came to this country with nothing and built something out of it. I so fully believe in supporting those that come from immigrant backgrounds and families. And everyone knows someone who is an immigrant, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Even
So,
if they don't want to admit it.
yes.
I bet you do. Like, I bet you know someone.
Totally. And on that note, it also means that first, I support what I call a clear path to citizenship. What does that mean? I think about my friends in grad school who came on a student visa, who could not find employment within a year. What does their path to citizenship look like? I think about, as you mentioned, those tech workers, people here on a work visa, laid off overnight. What is their path to citizenship? Coupled with the people that were born in this countries, but their parents have a different immigration status than they do and have done the right things, filled out the forms, been called for an interview, yet there's still a bottleneck and a broken and inconsistent system that hasn't gotten them to where they need to be. The last thing is, I got a call that ICE was in our neighborhoods in February, by the way. ICE has been terrorizing our communities well before August and this summer, well before Midway Blitz, because they were walking into our halal, kosher, Latino, Ethiopian owned businesses trying to meet their quotas. And I know because myself, along with folks of our rapid response team, hand canvassed each of these businesses to educate the business owners on their rights, the right to remain silent, the right to demand to see a warrant, a signed judicial warrant, not an administrative warrant, because that's what people have been doing. And we reminded them that please do not sign anything without a lawyer or attorney present of some sort. And you have the right to demand one before signing because we saw people unknowingly sign self-deportation notices.
Oh, God. That's awful. Like, I what you've said has struck me as maybe I'm going to regret saying this, a common sense approach, if you will. That seems very straightforward. That seems very, even keeled, dare I say. And it's wild, stunning, whatever adjective you want to put on it, that is not the norm. That there are people that are like, oh, we should keep terrorizing. Like, what?
Yeah.
Let's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. And it's the inconsistency that's really what gets me actually because this should not be confusing. This should not be something that is easy for one person and hard for another to do.
I grew up in Park Ridge, but I live in Glenview now, and they've been out in like full force in Glenview, which like is, and I know like the trope says like, oh, nobody cares until it's in their own community, but like there is something so jarring about living not in the city of Chicago and seeing ICE at my local Home Depot, at the freaking Trader Joe's. Like it's bizarre, it's jarring, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. And it's very refreshing to hear that this has been something that you have so clearly been on top of for months, not just weeks, for months.
Yeah, for the better half of this year, honestly. And it's one of those things that when I come back to consistency and credibility, folks know that who's been working and leading this fight well before they were congressional candidates. And to me, that's a litmus test to some extent because it's disruptive and it's dystopian when you see it in your community. Like the way that, Paige, you're reacting to them in Glenview is how jarring it was to me when I was like, what do you mean they're in Skokie? So actually the day that this happened was the day that main pipe, which is one of the main water pipes, burst in Skokie. And water was on the streets and it froze over because it was freezing temperatures. And when I got the call from a local business owner saying ice is in on our streets, I couldn't even comprehend what they were talking about, by the way.
Right, right. Well, that's what when I got the information from the Ring neighbors app, and it was like there's ice at Home Depot, which, mind you, is maybe 2 blocks down the road from me. I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean ice is at the Home Depot that I go get my potted flowers from?
Yeah.
That does not sound like real. Like it's just jarring.
I agree. 100% agree.
So to close out, we're going to be a little positive. We're going to get a little hopeful, maybe leave people feeling better than they came in to listen to this. As you look at the road we have ahead, we as in the state of Illinois, we as in Illinois' 9th district, we as in the United States in general, what gives you hope for the future and what keeps you motivated to continue this work, even though at this point it can look and feel very down and not very hopeful?
A sense of collective community gives me so much hope. I think about the family that was detained by ICE in June around the block from where I live, and I interpreted for that family in Spanish. And there was a meal train that leaders in the community put together so that person still has a dinner being provided for them and their family to this day. And this has been 4 months now. That type of community effort gives me so much hope. The enraged and anger that people feel for their neighbors actually gives me hope because thankfully now we're seeing that we don't have innocent bystanders that are watching this happen and unfold in our country. We have loud advocates and champions that are either using their vote intentionally, that are either volunteering in ways, whether they're spreading accurate accounts of information, such as yourself via this mode in this podcast. Even right now, I've been seeing people meet the moment where they are and doing it consistently. And that is beyond what I could ask for. I was speaking at a high school a couple days ago and they asked for a piece of advice because it feels so overwhelming and they don't know what to do and where to start. And I said, well, whatever you do, I want you to do it consistently. So if that means you volunteer for 1 hour a week on Sundays, you volunteer for 1 hour a week on Sundays until you're ready to do more. And that is the best rewarded thing that you can do because what happens is otherwise momentum dies as quickly as it's created. And if we're not pacing ourselves in this fight, we'll get burnt out and we won't have as many of us championing it the way that we can and should.
Yeah, that's a great point. The sense of community that I've seen come out of this, not just in the 9th district, but all over the place where people, using the ICE example again, people getting swiped off the street, for lack of a better word, and people are immediately there with their phones. Immediately they are asking where the warrant is. That, when that first happened, I think it was out in Massachusetts, I was like, oh shit. People are not going to let this just slide under the radar. And I love that about these communities.
Me too. I'm so here for it. And I'm proud of my neighbors. I'm proud of people like you. I'm proud of my friends and my mentors. And I'm proud of us as a nation, not maybe some folks in the establishment and inside, but I'm proud of those that are taking back power and control. It's about time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that is all I have for you. Do you have anything else that you feel like I might have missed?
No, you covered it. This was great. People want to learn more, keep in touch. My website is bushraforcongress.com and I'm at Bushra Amiwala on all socials. I respond to my DMs, so reach out if I can ever answer anything further.
Do you really? That's really brave of you.
Yeah, within reason, but I do read them all, I should say.
Oh my God, that's incredibly brave of you. I don't think I could ever do that if I was running for office. But I
Yeah.
will have your social media handles and website in the show notes so everybody can go and follow and donate and do all the wonderful things that they want to do. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Paige. This was so fun.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I really enjoyed my conversation with Bushra. I'm actually recording this right after I finished my conversation with her, so it is still fresh in my mind. And I just feel like I said at the top, like she would be a fantastic advocate for this district and overall knows her stuff. She's been serving this community for so long and ultimately just wants the best for the people that are living here. If you do live in Illinois 9, I do encourage you to, in general, just get out and vote, even if it is not for Bushra. This is an important primary, and Jan Schakowsky held that seat for so long, so it is so exciting to get somebody new into this seat. And as I mentioned, if you would like to donate to Bushra or you'd like to learn more about her website is linked in the notes. Of course, her social media is as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairsUnfilteredPod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to register to vote so you can vote in the primaries this March. I will see you guys next week.